It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome! Hey, everybody. Welcome in. My name is Chris. This is a show about sauce, not Gardner. Tomato. Hello there, you yacht possums. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're doing well. Those of you who are in the cold, I hope you're staying warm. I guess we might be talking about like half the country, the U.S. country, potentially getting threatened by a big storm. Be safe out there. I sure do love you. Let's talk some nonsense for an hour or so and hopefully brighten whatever your day has in store for you. We are a couple of days away from the conference championship games. Well, 3, I guess. Those of you in the yacht club heard Paywall Andy and myself talking about Sunday's games, doing some previews, making picks. And one thing we said on Monday's show was, Sean McDermott probably not getting fired after this loss in Denver, right? And then like 10 minutes after I posted the show, Sean McDermott got fired. I am 0 for 2 on Matt LaFleur and Sean McDermott. And that's, that's because nobody really knows anything until the teams do stuff. And it turns out John Harbaugh could have coached Josh Allen and instead will coach Jackson Dart. So maybe I'm not the only loser in this equation. As of my recording this on a Thursday morning, it's Harbaugh to the Giants. It's Kevin Stefanski to the Falcons, which is interesting. He has a history with Kirk Cousins. And Michael Penix will be rehabbing his knee all summer. We had Jeff Hafley going from the Packers defensive coordinator to the Dolphins head coach, where they do not have a starting quarterback at the moment, but both the GM and the head coach are coming from Green Bay. So if I was a betting man, I would maybe give Malik Willis a chance to sign with Miami in free agency. Robert Saleh goes to Tennessee, which, does it move the needle for me immediately? Maybe. There are rumors that Brian Daboll winds up there as an offensive coordinator if he doesn't get a head coaching job. And I kind of think, though, there's a pretty good chance that he gets a head coaching job. But that I've said the Titans defense is good, and Saleh being there doesn't hurt that. So that leaves what? Ravens, Raiders, Cardinals, and the gorilla in the room, suddenly the best job of all of them, the Bills, where Daboll feels like it's going to happen, but as we talked about on Monday, none of it matters if they don't remake the receiver room in Buffalo. I have a feeling after all this bad publicity this week, they probably are going to do that. Mike McDaniel won't be a head coach next year because he will be the Chargers offensive coordinator, which, on the one hand, I think is really good for Justin Herbert and company. And then on the other hand, isn't really good for you and me. Because you already know, I think the Charger offense was about to be excellent if it had stayed even remotely healthy. So if they get hyped this summer and the prices go up, that'll be annoying. Plus, if they play well, this is all Mike McDaniel. Also potentially annoying. Drew Petzing is the Lions offensive coordinator after he tried with Kyler Murray, begging the question, who in the Lions offense is the Marvin Harrison and who is the Michael Wilson? We think we can look at new coaches in new situations and tell ourselves we know exactly how this is going to go. We don't. Nobody thought Sean McVay was this unbelievable hire. It matters incredibly much whether a coach fits with his team. It's just difficult to know that beforehand. So, instead...
Time for your snarky email.
If your ears decide that the pod has satisfied, collect your comments, set compliments aside. If you're from parts known or an unknown part, email Hey Harris your snark.
Let's do a snark bag. It's been a little while. I have a rather giant backlog of emails. And I have a whole lot of very, very nice ones. The 95%, a lot of email because you're all amazing. I appreciate that very much. I'm very lucky to have such a kind audience. But of course, on the show, I like to read the ones with a requisite amount of snark. You can always send me mail of whatever kind you like to heyharris@harrisfootball.com. And of course, let me know where you're writing from, or don't. That's just fine too. Jeff Walks from Flyover Country. Hey Harris, not so long ago I was out with my wife at a choral concert in our town, and one of the songs performed by the group was Bridge Over Troubled Waters, and the entire audience was invited to join in the song. Well, this was a perfect time for me to sing along with the chorus, and unfortunately, when I got there, I sang that Jake Trowbridge is on the Harris podcast every Thursday show, at which point my wife gave me the death glare. Totally worth it. Matt Kimmel from Central Maryland. Hey Harris, I signed up for the Chubbies promotional leagues you were touting this summer, due in large part to following your sage advice, as I almost always do. I scored in the top 5 across all leagues for week 12 and was rewarded with free Chubbies gear. However, as I am the antithesis to Cousin Josh in virtually every way, I have neither desire nor the Instagram account for Rotomatond about these shorts.
Eye roll.
That's a very good word. There's a good word in this email. Nonetheless, they are a stylish, broad-bod alternative to the narrow man fit from Chubbies. This show is so stupid. Congrats, Matt. That is awesome. Eric Heinrichs from Parts Unknown. Hey, Harris, thank you for the wonderful Wednesday podcast, Discord shenanigans, YouTube shows, and deep shot access that was included with the Yacht Club for the past few months. I have allowed my subscription to lapse, but I'm planning on re-upping next August. Will there be a snappy nickname assigned to the possums who lapse and then return because we're too cheap to pay for off-season content? Come on, you got to pay for... That's all right, do what you want. Eric continues, if this categorization has not yet been assigned, may I suggest thrift drifters, penny pinching possums, or pouch pinchers? This show is so stupid. Greg Horowitz in Miami. Hey, Harris. With my roster ravaged by injuries, I was forced to scour the waiver wire for a flex in the championship match of my highly competitive 20-team deep bench league. I saw a recommendation for Theo Weiss, so I picked him up and put him in my starting lineup. I was thrilled watching Dolphins-Bucks when I saw Weiss break loose for a long touchdown, only to belatedly realize my fatal mistake. Because the analyst hadn't specified that I should pick up Theo Weiss Jr., I had actually picked up his father, Theo Weiss Sr., who did absolutely nothing on the Jags bench. If only he had called him by his true name, TWJ. Thank you very much, Craig. Ben Pancop, going back to New Year's Eve from Parts Unknown. Hey, Harris, I just watched the first offensive possession for Vanderbilt in the Outback Bowl, and I was sad to hear that their draftable tight end would not be playing today. Do you think this player bowed out of the contest due to an intimidation factor being compared to Iowa's illustrious list of NFL tight ends, or do you think he felt inadequate in his ability to consume Taco Bell at a rate comparable to Andy? Speaking of Taco Bell, since Andy has clearly attended more Outback Bowls than any person ever, don't you think that he should have had the first naming rights to the bowl game when they changed the name? Maybe the Crunch Wrap Supreme Bowl, the Bean Burrito Bowl, or possibly the Loaded Fiesta Potato Bowl. Chase Ronsley, newly in Colorado. Hey Harris, just finished listening to the Supercut episode, and each time I do, I feel like that's the official end of the fantasy season. I lost it when Josh was describing his dimensions when the eye of the swimsuit came on. Also want to say thanks for all the advice during the season. So long to 2025. P.S. I just moved to Colorado, and there are literally thousands of geese all over the place. Each time I see a swarm overhead, I can't help thinking of the constant fear Mr. Barons would be in. Jake Fowler from Newtown, Pennsylvania. Hey Harris, not sure what the entry fees or qualifications are to join Finger League, but if no one has claimed Matthew Stafford's injured finger, I call dibs and would love to know how many points that's worth considering the value it had before the injury. Josh Soares, Cranston, Rhode Island. Hey Harris, if I could sum up arrogance is in the air in one photo, I believe it would be this. And it's a post. It's a photo of a post. Someone named Asia sending out a tweet or a skeet, and it reads, why is it always NYC smells like piss and never my piss smells like the greatest city in the world? P.S., says Josh, also have Cousin Josh sign up to be on the next season of The Traitors. Colin Ports from Parts Unknown. Hey, Harris, watching this Steelers playoff game, Adam Thielen made a catch. Could we hear the sound drop one last time?
I'm hooked on a feeling. He's good at deceiving.
Brett Graham here in Los Angeles, the city that sometimes sleeps. Hey, Harris, now we have the insight into Curt Cignetti's meteoric rise as a big-time head coach. Every day when he orders his burrito bowl with rice, beans, and extra guacamole, it comes with one coaching tip, sort of like a fortune cookie, inside the lime that Joe Philbin has freshly cut. Boom. William McDavid, parts unknown. Hey, Harris, for your consideration and perhaps edification, some photos of how flamingos stay warm when it's chilly. And another picture here. It's freaky. I'm not going to lie. A bunch of flamingos standing on one foot with their freak necks all folded around their bodies like a garden hose and their faces buried backwards on their backs. I don't hate flamingos, but those necks, they are something else. A theme for these next few. This one's a longer one. Walker Dennis, East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. Love you, buddy. Hey, Harris. You have been so kind as to inform the Yacht Club that you have a new book that's about football that you're hoping to publish in time for the next NFL season. But you're still frustrated by the paste eaters who run the publishing world. I'm sending this snarky email because obviously the reach of your show is such that I'm sure that I'll be able to reach someone in the plush Park Avenue offices of the Big Six publishers. Oh, whoops, I guess now it's the Big Five. Oh, those two merged? I guess it's the Big Four. Okay, it looks like we're down to 3. Penguin, HarperCollins, and Hachette. You know what? Considering that's one more industry the oligarchs have ruined, publish the damn thing yourself. Relatedly, Troy Jacobs, Baton Rouge. Hey, Harris, I can't believe you don't have a literary agent who listens to your very stupid show and believes enough in your talent and dedication to sign you up and want to get you a book deal. Oh, and I am touching my fictional earpiece and I'm being told this email will be read in January. Never mind, nobody's listening. And Brad Kramer from St. Louis. Hey, Harris, let's get this straight. You have an MFA, a proven track record publishing books, a sizable audience who'd be willing to buy those books, and you're still not getting nibbles for a novel about football? I hate to break this to you. This might be one of those you need to shower more type deals. Okay. And finally, you love her. You can't live without her. Julie Red from Chicago. Hey, Harris. I was watching a recent Sunday morning live stream in which someone mentioned that your latest Hollywood paramour should be none other than Sydney Sweeney, a woman whose name Paywall Andy seems to intentionally not remember. As the thought was expressed in chat, I said to myself, well, sure, absolutely. Harris is a handsome guy, still a bachelor, despite all my efforts. Why not Sydney Sweeney instead of, as cousin Josh would have it, Jackson Dart being with Sydney Sweeney? And you read this comment out loud, and you turned very, very bright pink, which I continue to find charming. And what did you say? Good heavens, she's like 28 or something, isn't she? No thanks. And my friend, I'm writing to remind you, don't you live in LA? You're disqualifying yourself from dating a woman in her late 20s? I've consumed just about every piece of entertainment about Los Angeles over the past quarter century, and my impression of LA is that if you, a middle-aged man of means who lives on a yacht, were to date a 28-year-old, you'd probably be ostracized by your fellow middle-aged pervs for going geriatric.
Today's kickoff.
Okay, on today's show, a fun topic. Let's see how high we can jump. Matt Harmon from Yahoo Fantasy and ReceptionPerception.com will join, and Matt and I are going to list 5 level jumpers for 2026. Not always the easiest thing to do before you know how free agency will go and how the draft will go, but still very fun. I think and hope you'll enjoy it, and I thank you again so much for listening today. We are sponsored today by pre-alcohol from Z-Biotics. There's a pretty good chance you'll be experiencing the Super Bowl with some friends and maybe some drinks. And whether you're hosting or attending, if you like having a little alcohol, but you also like feeling good in the morning, I seriously, personally cannot recommend pre-alcohol enough. It's the first genetically engineered probiotic made to tackle rough mornings after drinking. I know that sounds like a lot. It works for me. Make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night and enjoy responsibly. I know I sometimes can't believe how much better I feel in the morning than I think I should, so much so that I just don't drink alcohol without Z-Biotics anymore. And you don't have to take my word for it. Order up some pre-alcohol for the Super Bowl. Try it out. If it doesn't work for you, they will refund you. No questions asked. You have nothing to lose except feeling bad in the morning. And if you go to zbiotics.com/Harris, you'll get 15% off your first order when you check out using the code Harris. Subscriptions are also available. Get that 15% off. zbiotics.com/Harris and use that code Harris.
Today's guest.
Wide receivers, they got to be approved by you to ride with me. Oh, don't you know now is the perfect time to tell us which team your lifeline better, but do it now before tomorrow's today. Or today is tomorrow. I want to know, boy, young boy, who should I target in the later rounds?
He is the boy, young boy, not so young, but younger than me, as we discussed before I hit the button. It is Matt Harmon. You can find him all over social media. Just look up Matt Harmon. The thing to emphasize is what a great time of year to check out receptionperception.com, because if you subscribe, it's a full year. And so you get the full calendar year of what's coming on Reception Perception, which will start when we get to draft season and free agency season, so very soon, where Matt will be charting a whole bunch of prospects and giving you insights that you're not going to find somewhere else, and then going all the way through the season. So just emphasizing that receptionperception.com is a wonderful resource, and you're a wonderful guest. Hello, Matthew Harmon.
Appreciate that, Chris. Yeah, I don't feel so young anymore. That's for sure. Any sort of my right shoulder is really impeding my training progress. That's where we're at in terms of the age bracket, where I've just got like one nagging problem that I can't get past. But yeah, no, reception perception, it's a great time. Really ramping up actually draft prospects earlier than ever. That's gonna hit the site around the same time, but I've already started working on it. So I'm juggling, like, still talking NFL playoffs, looking towards the future with you, and also looking at draft prospects. So it's a hell of a time of the calendar, and I love it.
What a time to be alive. It's us making podcasts in January, and it is fun. I run into problems right around now because through the end of the season, doing 5 shows a week, you wind up doing a lot of look-ahead content when you get to November and December. And we do a bunch of lists, probably one a week or something, just to keep the people who are out of it still having fun listening and whatever. And so I do a lot of these lists of, like, in the future this guy will be good, in the future this guy's dynasty value might go up, in the future, and they're all kind of the same list. And but don't tell the listeners. I don't think they're listening right now, so it's okay.
That's all good.
Yeah. So my goal here is to not keep mentioning the same players that I've continually mentioned, although I kind of cheated in multiple ways probably on this list. But we're each coming up with 5 potential level jumpers for next year. As I said off the top just a couple minutes ago, very difficult to do this without knowing what teams sign which free agents, which teams cut which players, which teams draft which. There's just a whole lot of settling down to be done, which is why this gets to be kind of more about the player maybe than this. Although situation's going to be relevant to some of these as well. You've done this show with me many times, so you know the deal. I was looking back at our 2025 January lists for the 25 season. I had Drake May on there, which I don't even remember. So that was kind of a good call. I don't think I was calling him to like a top 3 quarterback in the league. We both, as our number 1, had Rome Odunze. That didn't go extremely well.
It went well until it didn't.
Yeah, Tyrone Tracy was on your list. That was good. He hung in there, and I think eventually Scadaboo got hurt, and that wound up being pretty good. But it's a difficult exercise. I had Tank Bigsby. What are you gonna do? It didn't wind up with the same team. So anything you want us to keep in mind as before we get down to our 5 level jumpers?
I was going to say we both had Jalen Coker on the list, which I remember being pleasantly surprised about last year. And I feel like that obviously, from a fantasy standpoint, whatever. But I think I'd run Jalen Coker. I didn't run anybody back from this list on my list for 2026, but I would run back Coker 100% here to take another jump after the way he finished the season. I think he's an awesome player, so I'm happy we had him on the list. And
I'm laughing because I may have run it back with Jalen Coker.
Okay, well then we can talk about that more in a second. I was tempted to do it, but I wanted to bring some new names here, so we can run that back in a second. But even Odunze is a guy that I would consider running back for next year, especially because his big problem this year was the foot injury and some problems at the catch point, which is so frustrating, Chris, because this is obviously a guy that I really liked as a prospect, and his calling card, even if you didn't love him as a prospect, you still had to acknowledge he had some of the best hands in the draft and was a great contested catch receiver. And then he didn't really have any of those issues in his first season, and then second season it was all over the place at the catch point. So hopefully that can get corrected in year 3 and he could take another level jump to being kind of a good starting NFL receiver. But yeah, definitely a frustrating year for him. No doubt about it.
All right, so we're going to count them down. It's a pointless countdown. The order does not matter, but it matters so much. Who's your number 5 level jumper for 2026?
Yeah, I wanted to go with, I think, my chalkiest pick here, my most obvious pick, which is Jaguars running back Bhayshul Tuten as
He's
a level jumper.
Too. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I figured this was the chalkiest one. Wanted to include him, though, because he's definitely a really explosive player. I think you saw that in his rookie season. Travis Etienne might be moving on, and I think Etienne had a really nice season for the Jags. And, for me, that running back room last year, you had Bigsby on this list. For me, it was I didn't have like a bullish stand on any of the 3 guys, which it ended up just being 2 guys, but any of the 3 guys in the summer. But my thought was just take a player on your fantasy team and just see what happens, because it's an ambiguous backfield. I think all these guys are interesting to a degree. It never ended up being Bhayshul Tuten, but he had a couple of moments. He was trusted around the goal line at times. And again, that last playoff game, I thought you saw the explosive ability for him, several big chunk runs. I honestly kind of think that Jacksonville got away from the run game a little bit when they shouldn't have against Buffalo in that playoff loss. But yeah, I think Tuten's an explosive player who fits a lot of what they tried to do in year 1 under Liam Cohen, which is a lot of outside zone stuff, more perimeter runs than they did with the Bucs in 2024 when he was the offensive coordinator. I do think that fits Bhayshul Tuten's game, and a couple tweaks in his game, a little bit of development there, and maybe some additions on the offensive line. I think he could be an obvious breakout running back candidate next season. Yeah,
he was number 3 on my list here of a level jumper. Some of it is situation. Let's see what they do with ETN.
Sure.
We did an undervalued players list at some point in the recent past within the last month or so, and I put Travis Etienne on it only because I think people have the sour taste of a couple of years ago in their mouth still, not realizing that he, as you said, played very well this season and kind of at a moment when you thought, oh, maybe the rookie is Liam Cohen's choice. And so that's what, Etienne sort of made that flipping of the switch impossible by playing well, and then Tuten himself got hurt. So I don't think it's bad to say you're into both Tuten and Etienne, pending whether Etienne goes somewhere else. I'm kind of interested to see that. Tuten does a lot. He's obviously a good power runner because he became the choice at the goal line for a while there. He's a handful of tackle for sure. He actually can cut back a little bit on inside zone, unlike frickin' Travion Henderson, who never has done that in his life. I don't think he knows how to change directions. And you're right. Like on outside zone, when he can get the corner, Tuten's like, is it Jonathan Taylor? No, but he's pretty fast. And so a combination of I can see big plays coming, and we saw them in the playoff game. He made 2 around the right edge that were really nice. Combine that with someone who probably, if he was ever a feature back, wouldn't have to come out on the goal line. I imagine he's not the receiving back, but he can do it kinda. There's enough there where I go, all right, the people who were crazy hype on him going into this past season, they're going to forget about him. They're on to the next guy, whoever the next rookie is. And let's take a look. Tuten is, no matter what happens with the TNs, he's not going to be a second round fantasy pick and could wind up performing that way.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm definitely interested to see what his receiving outlook looks like, especially because they have another rookie running back from this past season, LaQuint Allen, who is probably never going to be a fantasy factor, but he's a really good actual NFL player. He plays on special teams, really good pass protector. He's kind of that classic long down and distance back, and maybe might end up being like a 2-minute drill guy. But this offense designs so much whether it was the screen game in 2024 with the Bucks to the running backs, or even this past year, like ETN, they kind of got him on some more like downfield stuff. I'd be interested to see if Tuten can fit into that, and that might offset anything of like LaQuint Allen being that kind of vulture on long down and distance, obvious passing down situations.
All right, for my number 5, I'll see you a short running back, and I'll raise you a short, light running back, who I've been pumping on this show for so long, and not pumping to say you even need to own him in a fantasy league, but just I like him. I've liked him. Obviously got interrupted by a big knee injury, but Keaton Mitchell, I don't know who the coach is going to be yet, and I mean Derrick Henry is still going to be there, and he was still very good this year, but the old coaching staff definitely reached a point with Derrick Henry that they decided a lot of the time we need to get him out. He might even be playing well, but we need to get him out. And the Justice Hill experiment finally feels like it went away, and it became a pretty clear, like 2/3 Derrick Henry, 1/3 Keaton Mitchell. You're not going to be able to run Derrick Henry plays with Keaton Mitchell. He's not going to be a power back like Tuten. He might be more like LaQuint Allen, except for I think he's lightning, and I always have, for all these years that we've been going around and around in the Raven backfield. There's a world where Keaton Mitchell works out as a 10th round pick, and just things don't break as well for Henry, or we're finally at the end of the cliff, or the coaching staff thinks something different. I don't think the difference between Keaton Mitchell and Devon Achane is that big. Achane has just did find the ultimate booster in Mike McDaniel, who wanted to build everything around him. And I think usually that doesn't happen for players this size, but he's going to be a year further away from the knee injury, and I think we're going to hear from Keaton Mitchell again.
Yeah, speaking of Mike McDaniel, there's still an outside chance that he ends up in Baltimore as the head coach.
I think he's the offensive. I think he's the coordinator for the Chargers, right?
He is. If he doesn't get a head coaching job, that he's taking that offensive coordinator job. But he did still interview with Ball. I think it's probably 90% chance he's the Chargers offensive coordinator. But the way that was reported was there's still he's still open to head coaching jobs. He pulled himself out of the Browns job. Shock. But he still interviewed with the Raiders and the Ravens. So there's a small chance that he ends up getting there, which, can you imagine the tweets now? Keaton Mitchell in the Devon Achane role? Oh my God. It'll be all over your timeline. He won't be any sort of sleeper in that standpoint. But no, so on a serious note, I do agree with you that Keaton Mitchell's a really explosive player. He's an obvious guy to like a lot. And yeah, it takes the right offensive mind, to see that guy and be like, I think he can be more than just a splash player. That obviously was not the view of the former Ravens coaching staff. They did just view him as more of a splash player, but they did at the same time get him on the field as a compliment to Derrick Henry. I wonder if there's a coach out there that sees the vision of him as more of a full-time player, because there's no doubt about it. Like, when he has the ball in his hands and he's got a lane, he can easily just gallop for 30 to 40 yards, and you just don't find a lot of backs like that out there.
We are sponsored again by our friends at Leesa, who make the mattress I sleep on. I'm really thankful to have them as a sponsor. Probably more thankful to have them under me every night, because I sleep better on a Leesa, and that's been true bi-coastally for a decade. And here's the thing. I know your instinct when you need a new bed is, go to the superstore, sit on a dozen of them. I've been there. I've done that. But it's 45 seconds tops. You pick a mattress. I remember the last time I did this. The store called me the next week saying, well, what do you think? And I was like, well, I'm not really sure yet. And they were like, you better get sure, because you got until Friday to return it. With Leesa, of course, you get 4 months to sleep on your new bed. If it's not perfect, tell them. They'll refund it and come pick it up. It's a great company. I really think you'll be happy with Leesa, and they're offering 20% off mattresses when you go to leesa.com. Plus, if you check out using the code Harris, they'll take another $50 off the top. If it's time for a new mattress in your house, this is the best way to shop. Leesa.com for 20% off, and for another $50 off, use that code Harris. Okay, we're back with Matt, and we're counting down our level jumpers. For 2026, we're at your number 4. Who you got?
Okay, tell me if this one is cheating or not, because you did specify in your email that we're not allowed to, or we want to not use somebody that the caveat of the long injury or whatever, missed most of the year. So you can tell me if this guy is cheating or not, but I think he's still under the radar enough that he probably should count. That's Tory Horton from the Seattle Seahawks, who did miss a ton of time with injuries when he seemed like he was just starting to break out. But if they don't bring back Rashid Shaheed to this team, if Cooper Kupp ends up being a cap casualty, which sucks to talk about that when they're quite literally making a Super Bowl run right now. At the same time, though, you would imagine that, hey, Cooper Kupp's on this big contract. I don't know that his contributions at this point are worth that. I don't think they actually even make the Rashid Shaheed trade if they didn't have the Tory Horton injury, because, man, I think Horton is awesome. And he might be a guy that can't stay healthy. He might be just not built for the NFL. He obviously fell in the draft last year because of injury down to day 3 in the 5th round. But he was more of, at least in my opinion, like a early second round talent, because he not only has the speed to get down the field, he has shiftiness in the open field. He's a good route runner, man. He's strong technically. He can beat press coverage. Like I said, I think he can get on top of teams, but also at the same time run more base underneath routes. In an era right now where we're so, or at least we should be, so hyper focused on, can a guy at wide receiver be on the field all the time? Or are they one of these guys that's going to sub out, as a third rotational receiver, and he's going to lose playing time and routes to tight ends and these heavier formations and things of that nature? Horton is not that guy. Like, he can absolutely play outside. He was playing outside as a rookie. Him and JSN, I think, actually can be a little interchangeable as the 2 perimeter receivers. So I would love to get some truth serum into the people in Seattle and be like, what do you really think about Horton? Because when I was watching him earlier this year, I'm like, oh, that guy is on track to be a breakout rookie in the second half of the year. And then he unfortunately has that injury. But I think if the deck clears the right way and they still have a lot of faith in the player, I think he's awesome. And I think he could be like a legit wide receiver too for the Seattle Seahawks.
Nope, sorry, I don't allow it. I disqualify. Do you have anybody else? Just kidding. No, people know.
I was going to say, you could have stopped me at some point in the soliloquy.
You didn't take a breath. He was on I think December 30th. We did players whose film we love. I did it with Chris Raybon, and Tory Horton was on my list. He was number 5 on my list. I fully am on board. I didn't know anything about him as a prospect at all because I don't really pay too much attention to them as prospects. I want to see them play in the NFL. And remember that Monday night touchdown he scored right before the injury? Where was it against the Commanders? Maybe
Commanders. Yeah.
And that was a filthy route. And it was Mikey Sanistrell, even the guy everybody loves. Yeah. They turned him inside out. Yeah. Fully glad that he gets mentioned again. I've talked about him a bunch, so that was a good one. Speaking of players we've talked about a bunch, number 4 for me is Jalen Coker, who pride of Holy Cross. I always got to say that, Worcester, Massachusetts. He's not from there, but he went to college there.
You know where he's from, actually?
He's from
the great state of Virginia, Sterling, Virginia, up at Potomac Falls High School, which is pretty close to where I grew up, actually. So, yeah. There you go.
He's the exact arithmetic mean between our 2 geographies.
Look at that.
He's, again, can a second Carolina Panther receiver ever be fantasy relevant with this coaching staff and this quarterback? Maybe not. Maybe I should have said with this quarterback and this coaching staff. Possibly no. And Tedero McMillan was terrific this year, and I expect him to be good again. So, maybe this just doesn't amount to anything, the Coker appreciation that you and I have had for his film over the last 2 years. But all you can do is say what you see. And when I watch Coker's film and I really focus on him, all the kid does is get open. He's not huge and he's not super fast, but there's some Jacoby Myers in his game, but maybe a little more explosive than that, potential for yards after the catch that maybe Myers doesn't have. And they keep throwing bodies at him. They keep trying to get other players to be at that number 2 receiver spot, and eventually they always go, yeah, let's just play Coker. He's probably the one. And like you were saying with Horton, by the end of the year, it felt like they were all right, we're not gonna Xavier Legette, we're not going to pretend anymore. Just, when we're in 2 receiver sets, you sit over there and we'll let you know when you're back in the game, because by the end, Coker wasn't coming out.
Yeah, I think you described that beautifully in a couple different ways. One, yeah, Jakobi Meyers was my comparison for him when he first started popping up in his rookie season, because he was the slot player, because he's an undrafted player. And again, I think could he just end up having that nice, solid, good career that Jakobi Meyers has had? I think that was readily available for Coker. The thing that's interesting about him, though, is that I do think I don't know how to describe, maybe a little bit more rugged than Jakobi Meyers, who I think is like a tough player, beats zone coverage, goes over the middle, and is an underrated player against man coverage. But again, just the player that Coker turned into, and I think this is important to say, that he turned into by the end of his second season, not just in the playoff games, but like you mentioned, late in the year last year, he started to take over as that number 2 receiver. And you're right to describe it that they're constantly kind of throwing bodies at him in terms of, hey, like, yeah, Legette's the first round pick. They want him to work out. They brought Hunter Renfrow in, stuff like that. Adam Thielen was ahead of him on the depth chart, and he just kind of kept beating players out to the point where it became undeniable. And I think even offense coordinator Brad Idzik said, this is a production business. And Coker, it was way better on film as a rookie than Xavier Legette, and was way, way better once he got healthy this past season. And Dan Morgan, the GM, also talked about this in his end of season presser, that Coker's a guy that there was kind of some whispers that they didn't love how he came back this year in terms of his conditioning and his body and stuff like that. But by the end of the year, he's like, this is a kid who transformed his body after the injury. And I think you kind of saw that on film too, because he was so much more explosive vertically than he was as a rookie. I always remember he had probably like every single week, it started in the Rams game, then every single week, basically towards the end of the season, he would have like one big catch on a go route against press man coverage as the X receiver, which allows them to move McMillan around. So that's cool. But yeah, I love Coker. I'm really, really high on him. I just didn't want to run him back for this list, but I'm glad that you did, because like, yeah, this is a guy that we absolutely should keep talking about. He is going to be a really, really good player for this team. We'll just see how good the offensive ecosystem is around him.
Yeah, and I love the opportunity to draft someone like Coker in a fantasy league, assuming everything remains like perception-wise the way it is now, because good, give me the very good player who, if we're wrong, because we're wrong about teams and situations all the time, if we're wrong and Carolina turns into more of a wagon and Bryce Young starts to become more believable and all that stuff, I don't know if that's going to happen, but if it did, there's your beneficiary who I'm drafting in the 13th round, and I'm hanging on to for a month and just seeing how it works out. So that kind of player winds up on a lot of draft lists for me. How about your number 3?
My number 3, I'll go to tight end here. Rams rookie tight end Terrance Ferguson for me is a guy that I think has flashed in bits this year. A guy that is really like, for a tight end, he is very fast. He gets down the field, and I actually think that speed has been pretty integral to some of the times when the Rams have leaned really heavy into 13 personnel. And I think his particular skill set is a big reason why they could do that, because he actually does provide a credible vertical threat at tight end, where typically it's like, okay, 3 tight ends, who's the guy that's clearing space? It's going to be the outside receiver. But because Ferguson is like I said, a credible vertical threat, they can use his speed to clear space out to then get Puka Nacua or Devontae Adams, whoever that single receiver is in 13 personnel. They can get him some space to roam. They can get him free, which I think is pretty exciting if you're Sean McVay and the Rams, right? We're talking about for a fantasy perspective, you're not getting points for clear out routes. Obviously, or then Matt Collins would be the best receiver in the league. But nevertheless, we're talking about a guy though that the coaching staff really likes. They value him in this way. I think that could lead to more opportunities next year if we see some of the other tight ends move on. If we do see just Terrance Ferguson take those steps forward as an individual player, because there's definitely times this year where him and Matthew Stafford have not been on the same page. He's, I think, struggled a little bit to track the ball down the field at times, maybe to win tight contested catches. But he's a young player. He's probably still growing into his body, as most tight ends are early in the NFL. But I think the speed and the movement skills are very obvious when you watch this guy guy, both at Oregon and this past season here with the Rams. And there's even been times, especially when Adams was out, where they would move him outside and be just like a receiver, like a true split out wide receiver in packages that were 3 tight ends on the field, and he would operate as that player. So I think we've seen a lot from him, not from a production standpoint, but we've seen a lot of trust and kind of usage wise from him in the coaching staff. And I do think that the speed and the athleticism is very apparent when you watch him play.
I agree with that last statement. The speed and athleticism is very apparent. And it seems to me after watching him for 1 year that he's going to go one of 2 ways. He's either going to get better at football or he's going to be out of the league.
Pretty much.
He stunk. If you're only judging like performance to opportunity ratio, because they gave him a lot of opportunities. And it just always felt like, that dude's open. Who is that? Is that a big receiver? Oh, that's the tight end. It's the rookie. Oh, my God, the ball just hit him in the head. Just a lot of like, you said it in a way that I agree, like a colt growing into his full body and not knowing where his limbs are supposed to go, and just a lot of like uncoordinated looking stuff, when in fact he's incredibly coordinated. He's just doing things that tight ends typically don't do. He's essentially like a big... how many times do I need to listen to Chris Collinsworth say, no, he's not really a he's almost like a big receiver, Yep, I got it. And so this kind of player, does he... Because like McVay doesn't put him in those situations if he's not excited about the raw materials and how,
Exactly.
Right away he's throwing him in a world where he's got a lot of other tight ends, but they're using Ferguson very differently. On the other hand, if you just watched his ball skills, his like coordination when he's matched one-on-one against a guy and trips over his own feet and all that stuff, you'd go, holy cow, like what in the world? Can I compare your thought process on 2 young tight ends between Terrance Ferguson and Brenton Strange? They're not exactly the same kind of player, but Strange has a lot of really good athletic qualities that can get him, at least down the seam. I think people are generally going to be higher on Strange than Ferguson, so I'm not trying to say, haha, you should have picked Strange here, because you're saying, no, Ferguson's going to get to that next level. But as prospects, does Strange excite you more than Ferguson?
Definitely. I wouldn't have picked Brenton Strange for this list because I kind of think he's already arrived.
Which that's a good point.
This is why this is a fun exercise, because it's super nebulous and there's no rules. But yeah, for Strange, and also he did miss a big chunk of the year. But I actually think if you are a Terrance Ferguson backer, you kind of want him to go the way of Brenton Strange, because I think Strange in his first season, it was kind of like, number one, when they drafted him, it's like, isn't that basically just drafting Evan Ingram, a guy that Chris Collinsworth would be like, it's not really a tight end, he's more of a big receiver. And that's kind of who Brenton Strange was supposed to be as a prospect. So when the former Jags front office with Trent Baalke takes him, you're like, isn't that duplicative skill sets? And then he flashed a lot in his second season, did Brenton Strange, and you kind of think, okay, well, how is he going to fit now that Evan Ingram's clearly out the door and this is a new coaching staff? But I think Brenton Strange this year turned into more of just a true tight end. Like, I think he actually had some really nice moments as an inline blocker, and they can split him out and make him a mismatch weapon for sure. But he turned into more of that traditional Y tight end, which is kind of what I think you want to see from Terrance Ferguson at one point. Like, yeah, it's cool that you can be the fast guy and run those clear out routes, but you probably want to add some muscle to your body. You want to add some bulk so that you can be on the field all the time, which is what I think Brenton Strange did. So, I love Strange. I think he's really, really good. Yet another one of these Jags players that's, hey, it wasn't Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. It was basically everybody else that helped this offense be really good by the end. And Brenton Strange is one of those names for sure.
We are sponsored by Blue Land, and they have changed the way I clean. When I clean the yacht, I only use Blue Land, and I'll tell you why. It's a way to get the highest standard of clean while throwing away so much less plastic, and because from cleaning sprays and toilet bowl cleaner to dishwasher and laundry detergent tablets, Blue Land is microplastic free and a safer choice, certified by the EPA, so you can use them around kids and pets and plants, etc. I've had Blueland as a sponsor for now a few years. And ask me how many hand soap bottles I've thrown away. None. How many glass cleaner bottles? How many detergent bottles? None. You get a single-use bottle for any cleaner that you buy, and then you get tablets sent by mail. You add water, you've got your cleaner, and it's great. And you won't throw away so much plastic. It's an easy change, something I feel like I've done. Okay, yeah, is it a small thing in comparison to like everything in the world? But you know what? That's how things are going to change. Maybe we can make a difference. And right now, I can get you 15% off your first order if you want to check them out at blueland.com/Harris. Please do. I think it'll help. And plus, it's great cleaning. 15% off. blueland.com/Harris. That's blueland.com/Harris. Okay, we're back with Matt, and we are counting down our level jumpers for next year. My number 3 was the same as your number 5. That's Bhayshul Tuten. So who's your number 2?
My number 2, I'm going to go with the quarterback position here. And dude, I'm a really big Tyler Shough fan, I think. I'm curious to hear what you think about Tyler Shough and where he is at this point, what you've seen from him. But I really liked what I saw from him down the stretch. And obviously I'm a huge Chris Olave fan. And I had Chris Olave on a ton of fantasy teams this year because he was so undervalued in drafts because he was definitely going to get a concussion again. And I also think there were a lot of people that thought he was straight up just like not that good. So I drafted a ton of Chris Olave. I've been a longtime fan of his. So I've been weirdly dialed in on the Saints this past season. And, early on in the year, I think you saw Spencer Rattler be kind of, I don't want to call him like a game manager, but a good like facilitator of the offense. And he'd get out there and he'd be able to read out some of the plays that I think Kellen Moore is a really underrated play designer and offensive mind. And I thought Rattler handled that well. But there was clearly a lot of meat left on the bone down the field for this offense, specifically with Olave. And then watching it with Shough, who honestly I really didn't have a strong feeling on as a prospect, but there were some concerns in his profile. He gets in there and that guy's immediately, the thing that stood out to me was he would stand in the pocket pretty confidently. And that was not something that was supposed to be in his prospect profile. He was supposed to be kind of a guy that would wilt under pressure, do a little bit of the Jimmy Garoppolo turtle up in the pocket. I don't think you saw any of that. I thought you saw him just do straight drop back and push it from one hash to the far side of the field on these kind of deeper outside the numbers passes, which immediately allowed for these bigger, more explosive weeks for Olave. So it was kind of like a little bit of old school quarterbacking in that way with Tyler Shough. I think the arm talent is solid. I think his decision-making is solid. I think his confidence really stood out as well as the player that he became late down the stretch. So I think he makes sense for me for a level jumper. And like, what is a level jump from him? From a fantasy standpoint, that will be, interesting to see because I do think he's got some athleticism. I don't think he will ever be a guy that is piling up, 500 rushing yards or something like that. But could he have a Baker Mayfield type outing as a scrambler at some point? I think that's potentially possible. That would be a big deal for his fantasy outlook in addition to what could they do in terms of surrounding him. But I also think from just a talent perspective, I think he could level jump into a guy that is, a clear-cut franchise quarterback for the New Orleans Saints that they got in the second round. Like, I kind of thought he might be a Derek Carr type player when he got into the NFL, which is ironic because the Saints had Derek Carr at one point. But I think he could actually be better than that. I think he played more confident in the pocket and pushed the ball down the field much better than I saw Carr did for the most of his career.
Yeah, it's funny how many debates over the course of the year I had with Barons about Tyler Shough and his analysis. I mean, I'm gonna throw him under the bus because he's not here to defend himself, but
that's fine. We can talk about Andy behind his as two of his friends. We can talk about it behind his back.
a lot of his criticism for Tyler Shough would be like, he's 8 years older than whoever, Teddy Bridgewater. Like, he's basically he's no good because he's too old. I wouldn't want to have him on a team because he's too old. And I go, I mean, he's what? He just turned 26. How long do you think you're going to have these players? Like, these guys, if they're good, play till they're 36. You got him 10 years. You really need a longer window than that. If he can play, what do you care how old he is? Well, his ceiling isn't high. And I go, why can't a 25-year-old get better in a way that a 22-year-old can get. Like, they all learn a lot when they get to the NFL. And it's fair to say, if you want to make the argument, the reason he looked polished, the reason he could, against a pretty easy schedule with a team that was obviously playing out the string, and once there's really meat on the bone and people are trying to heap expectations on his incredibly long neck. He's another one of those guys with the neck, like, incredible.
Yeah, he is.
That maybe we'll actually see, like, that baseline level of polish that he came into the league with won't sustain him, and he won't be able to grow. But the dude who I kind of compare him to is Trevor Lawrence a little bit. He doesn't maybe quite have as big an arm, but, like, is that a crazy comp?
By the way, Trevor, they're both 26 years old. So
there
you go. I'm pretty sure they were in, like, the same recruiting class or something like that. And obviously Trevor Lawrence is on a contract. All of the jokes about Tyler Shough, I definitely participated in them. And I thought it was like, well, when you take Tyler Shough in the second round at that age, you're either doing one of two things. You're going to get a steal, or you are absolutely lighting the pick on fire if you're the Saints, because you're just going to replace him next year. And I think the conversation about is he going to be replaced next year ended a long time ago. He clearly is the future. Yeah, he's definitely good enough. And I think the Trevor Lawrence comparison is good. And I think that comes back to my point about, can he become that level of a scrambler? Because he ripped off a fast 40 at the combine, did Tyler Shough. He just didn't really use that athleticism very much. And that was, speaking of Andy, as we continue to talk about him behind his back, that was something Andy and I bemoaned constantly when we would pod together about Trevor Lawrence. It's like, this guy is like a real deal scrambler. Like, get out there and pick up some yards with your legs, pal. And he would just never do it. And the former Jags coaching staff never really weaponized him to do so. And that obviously happened this year for Trevor Lawrence, a big part of why he was such a good fantasy quarterback down the stretch. And I definitely think that that's something that Shough could do. The other thing I would say, to your point about just like the ceiling thought about him from a quarterback, it's more of like a meta thing. I do think that this is not like taking a shot at anybody, but I think we as a whole, again, I'm talking about myself here because I've been a part of this conversation. I think we need to recalibrate what makes a quarterback reach his ceiling. And it's, the athleticism and stuff is nice, which I think you imagine is maxed out when a guy is 26 years old. But to me, most quarterbacks reach their ceiling when they are polished, when they have seen everything, when they have a lot of experience. And just because you're 26 years old doesn't mean you're more experienced coming into the league than other players. But that to me is more about a ceiling for Tyler Shough, which, like, you're going to just reach that at some point, even when your athleticism wanes. So I agree with you. Like, if Shough gets 6 years as the starting quarterback for the Saints, I still think that can be a win, even if by year 6 he's 32 years old. That's when most quarterbacks are in their mental prime anyways. Yeah. Exactly. So I think it's just part of the recalibration we need to do as a whole, as an NFL community, about, like, what is a ceiling for a quarterback versus what is the floor for a quarterback. It's like, great, a mobile quarterback like Anthony Richardson, everybody's like, oh my God, the ceiling on this guy if he ever figures it out. Well, he's probably not going to get enough time to figure it out. That's another problem. So again, this is a long rant, but I think Shough is a little bit instructive on that sort of point there.
My number 2, I'm not going to spend that much time on because I think everybody got to see him. It's stupid that he's on this list, but it's smart too, because you'll understand what I mean. I put Michael Wilson on the list.
Oh,
because you and I both, we've talked about Michael Wilson a lot, and we got to see the fruits of our crush for these couple of years when Wilson finally gets a chance in a completely another untenable, like, Jacoby Brissett stinkfest. But yeah, obviously Wilson wins people some fantasy leagues, and now I think folks are going to go, okay, now the adults can be in the room and there'll be a new coach, and so Marvin Harrison can just take his rightful place on the throne, and Michael Wilson, you go sit in that corner over there. And my point in putting him here is I'm not so sure about that. What's the point at which you decide to just believe your eyes? And okay, yes, the Michael Wilson resurgence, or I guess it's not a resurgence, it's just a surgence, happened because and when Marvin Harrison kept getting hurt. Marvin Harrison still has a chance to be good. I'm waiting for him to look like he's a good player. It happens, once every few games. Michael Wilson, it looks like every week. And maybe I'm putting him on this list to say the big gap that people are going to have between Harrison and Wilson in their ranks next year maybe shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and I think it's so funny you bring up Michael Wilson and how we've talked about it. I think I've probably talked about Michael Wilson on this show more than any other show. That's including my own shows. But, to reiterate the point, like this is a guy that had a pretty solid prospect profile in terms of the ability to beat man press coverage. He showed that in his rookie season charting for reception perception. He is one of the guys that I'm kicking myself that I didn't chart last season because he just wasn't projected to be a very relevant player. And, there's only so many hours in the day and I am only one person. So I didn't get to him coming into this year. But yeah, he's a player I've always had a lot of affection for. And when I charted him in season this year, he's just smoking man press coverage and he's winning in tight coverage situations too. I love your point about how people will immediately think it's going to fall away from Michael Wilson. And look, there's a lot of regression based indicators for this Cardinals offense as a whole from a fantasy standpoint, because we can all be honest here. That was a complete scam, like a fantasy scam that they were running late last year. Michael Wilson led the NFL in routes run this year. And a big part of that was obviously Marvin Harrison not playing, but he was out there regardless. And this is why the whole phrase oh, he's a target earner or he's not a target earner is kind of it's like it's founded in something smart, but it misses the mark in a lot of way. Because if you look back at Michael Wilson at the beginning of the season, really throughout the entirety of his career, he's not getting any targets. And then once he starts getting targets, he's awesome with them. It's like, oh, did he suddenly become a target earner? Or exactly. No, it's nonsense. No, the other guy was removed from the equation. It consolidated around two players because their depth is terrible and they were just dropping back over and over again. He's always been a really talented player, and there's a lot of guys like that in the league that just get overlooked. And I'm glad Wilson had his moment in the sun. I still am, for the record, a believer that Marvin Harrison can get on track and figure it out. It's going to take a different coaching staff than the one that he had last go around, and he obviously needs to improve as a player at the catch point as well. And this is a separate conversation, but just would quickly love your thoughts on this because I'm not sure how out on the ledge I want to go with it. I actually am a little bit like the player I'm the most worried about in the offense is kind of Trey McBride, because he's a guy that's going to get steamed to maybe being a first round fantasy pick. And I think he's an awesome player, and there's no coaching staff that's going to come in here and be like, all right, let me reduce Trey McBride's role. That would be smart. But it is going to be a different offensive system. I think this offense is very geared. Drew Petzing and these guys were very geared towards the tight end. It's one of the few offenses that makes that a first read player, whereas most times it's going to flow to the outside receivers. I do think these two guys, especially Harrison and Wilson, if they're used interchangeably, can be even better than they've been previously. They might take some looks away from McBride. And obviously, again, there's a lot of regression-based indicators just of how much they were dropping back anyway. So I think the immediate fantasy hive mind analysis is going to be Michael Wilson takes a step back. I actually think it could be Trey McBride takes a small step back next year.
Plus, we don't draft tight ends in the first round, period. We all know that. So we're not going to do that. Okay, who's your number one?
My number one, and I'm nervous to make this guy my number one, even though it means nothing, just because of what I said. Because of what I said earlier about receivers that we should be more worried about now in terms of guys rotating on and off the field. And this guy could potentially fall into the Josh Downs bucket, who, by the way, I think Downs is a guy I consider putting on the list, but I think enough people know I love Josh Downs as a player, and I think there is a path for him to be the Colts receiver too next season. So again, I considered Downs, but I went with the guy that could be Josh Downs, which is maybe a promise and a warning here. And that's Jaylin Noel from the Houston Texans. And God, maybe I'm just totally wrong, and I don't have a feel on who the player is, but it's bizarre to me that this guy never got more usage for the Texans this year. And I don't think the Texans are very smart from an offensive standpoint, and I think they're very old school traditional. You would know this well, New England stuff. We don't play rookies. We don't trust rookies. And I think that could be why Noel never got a shot really this year. But when he was on the field, he absolutely looked the part. He's explosive. He separates at all three levels, but especially down the field on breaking routes. And that's something that CJ Stroud for all of his struggles in the playoffs, has been really good at taking and making those throws throughout the course of his career. And when Noel was on the field, he clearly liked going to him, but he just didn't play very often. So the history of rookie wide receivers who don't ever get a chance like that becoming, fantasy relevant, the history is not long. Okay. Like you're kind of betting against the odds here with Noel, but I think if you were to bet against the odds with expectations, understanding that he might be one of these guys that's not a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in fantasy, but could become like a good player that has his moments. Noel's a guy that I think you would want to bet on because, like I said, I think the talent is there. I loved him as a prospect, and for whatever reason they didn't play him, but I think when he was on the field for the Texans, he flashed and looked good.
He did flash and look good, and then he disappeared for 2 weeks, and that's not a thing we can really even know why. They don't tell us that. We wish they would. There's a big rotation there, and just so much Xavier Hutchinson, and you're like, okay, man, what? And then the big hero in the playoff win over Pittsburgh is Christian Kirk, who you haven't used all year.
Who essentially plays the same position as Noel. I get that, and obviously, he's had the good run in the playoffs, but it's not like Christian Kirk was really popping at different points of the year, as you mentioned.
No, and did he do anything? They really needed him against the Patriots, that's for sure, and he didn't do anything. I think probably unless they re-sign him, Kirk essentially has void years left in his career. He's gone. He's not going to be there. Yeah. So, hopefully. I mean, Jaden Higgins, who I talked about, as someone who I like. I'm sure for different reasons you probably like Higgins too. It's just it's tough to know how that all works out. My one is going to be less controversial. I put him on here because when I did that list with Raybon, back at 3 weeks ago or something, we both picked the same player, but I had extras, so I let him have Parker Washington, and he wasn't on my list. This is another vote for just believing what you saw, rather than assuming, well, Brian Thomas is the first round pick and he's the one who we thought was going to be good last year, and Jacoby Myers just signed a new deal and he's a very important player and obviously was a big part of the offense kind of like perking up and becoming elite in the second half of the year. But all I know is every time I watch a Jags game, Parker Washington makes the whole thing go, and I can almost promise you right now I'm going to have Parker Washington ranked for fantasy for 2026 highest among the Jag receivers.
I love it. Again, Parker Washington is similar to that Michael Wilson bucket in that he's a prospect that I really had affinity for. I kind of called him a Bud Light Golden Tate during his prospect charting, which it depends on what you remember of Golden Tate, right? Do you remember the pop gun slot receiver that he was for the Detroit Lions, or do you remember him as this kind of guy that would really get downfield and win in contested situations for the Seattle Seahawks? And I think Parker Washington has been a little bit more of the latter than the former, and that's been exciting to see. So I'm with you that the talk, and this continued to be the talk even into the playoffs, was, oh, well, Jacoby Myers, him being here has saved this offense. And I think that's true. Like, there's no doubt that Myers being able to play inside out really helped a lot, but Parker Washington being this guy who could lift the lid from the slot and be a guy that, legit beats man coverage, is just a damn good football player. Like, he had some weird drops when they were using him as, I think incorrectly to start the year, as like a true downfield outside receiver. He did have some drops and, struggles at the catch point then, but once they kind of got him inside, which for a 5'10", 200-pound receiver is probably what you want to do, he really thrived. I love Parker Washington. I think he's really good, and I can't wait to just see what happens with this Jags receiver room this coming season, because Washington is good, Myers is good, although Myers is 29 years old, so he's getting up there a little bit. But Parker Washington is good, Myers is good. BTJ, is he traded? Do they play Travis Hunter more at corner than wide receiver? I think there's a lot potentially on the table here, but I do know for sure that I trust my eyes, and I think Parker Washington's good, just as you do.
Do you imagine there's a world where he's your number one ranked among the Jags receivers in your just season-long ranks for drafts next year? Is Washington going to be your highest Jags receiver, or are you going to hedge a little?
I'll probably do the hedge ranking where they're all kind of bunched up close, which is sort of what I did with the Colts this year, where I thought it was a similar situation where it's, hey, this is a wide receiver room that probably doesn't have a number one, but they've got a collection of guys that are all good and close in terms of talent. But I ended up having Michael Pittman. I ended up having Downs number 1, and then Pittman was close behind, and then the Pierce thing was kind of right there as well. And I think with this Jags team, it will probably be something like that. But I do think there's a lot to learn here in terms of. I don't know if I was them, I don't know if I would trade Brian Thomas Jr., but I think the more I've thought about it, I think there's a pretty good chance that they might do it, just because he just didn't fit this year. I think they could recoup a lot of draft capital for him, and they gave up a lot of draft capital to get Travis Hunter. And I think they don't want to bail on the Hunter wide receiver experiment either, and nor do I think they should, by the way. So I think there's a chance that Thomas is not on the roster, in which case, yeah, Washington in that situation, without question, would be, I think, the top-ranked guy.
All right, well, that'll be one of many, many things to track as we get to this offseason. This was a fun list. You can find all the players that we put on the list in today's show notes. Thank you for doing this again, my friend. I want folks to remember that just as we're finishing up here, just click on your phone, get a browser open, go to receptionperception.com, check out what Matt's has going on there. It's a great time to subscribe, as I said earlier, because you're subscribing for the full year, so you'll begin with the course of charting the prospects and then charting the free agents and taking a look at the interesting guys from this past season, and you'll follow Matt all the way through as they perform into the 2026 season. It really, really helps your fantasy team. That is for sure. Thank you so much for doing it, my friend. I'll hopefully get to talk to you soon.
No doubt. I appreciate it as always, Chris. It'll be good to look back on this list 365 days from now.
And thank you so much for listening. That will be lovely. And we'll take a look at how well we did next year. I want to thank the sponsors, because without sponsors, there's no show. We had Z-Biotics, Lisa, and Blue Land. And if anything I said about today's sponsors made them interesting to you and you have the means to give them a click and a support, that's lovely, because that's how they keep coming back. I appreciate how much you all do when the need arises that you do support the sponsors. The reason I know that is because they keep coming back to sponsor, and they wouldn't do that if you weren't supporting them. So thank you so much for that. I put information about today's sponsors in the show notes of today's show, so just check them out there. All the current sponsors are listed at harrisfootball.com. That will do it for this episode. So coming up on Monday on the Yacht Club show, we're going to be coming out of the conference championship games, but we're not going to be talking that much football, because if you are a Yacht Club subscriber, you know that I've been hyping up a favorite band of mine for to be interviewed on the paywall show, and it's finally happening on Monday. It's going to be Rat Boys. If you're an indie rock fan, I'm pretty sure you know who Rat Boys are, and if you don't, I hope you get to know them even more from this conversation we're going to have. We're recording it on Monday afternoon, so it won't post the usual Monday morning time. It's going to post more in the afternoon, evening. It's Julia and Dave from Rat Boys will be with us, and they're big football fans, and we're going to talk some football, but also talk about the band. They have a new record coming out. So stoked to bring you that one. If you're not a Yacht Club subscriber and you'd like to be, it's $5 a month. You can find information at harrisfootball.com. Then we'll be back here on next Thursday. It's the week off before the Super Bowl. That is when we always do a total request episode. We're going to answer your questions, football and non. Do I know who the guest is going to be yet? I do not, but by golly, I'll figure it out by then. And it will be great fun as well. Until then, thanks again so much for listening. Your hat is awesome. You're awesome for wearing it. I will talk to you next time.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The closing theme is Say Yes by The Wellspring. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.